Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
If you served in the military, the Alaska VA welcomes you home and thanks you for your service. You may be eligible for VA healthcare benefits, including reimbursement for your care at 26 tribal health facilities and their more than 180 outlying clinics throughout the state of Alaska. Apply online in less than 5 minutes.
The National Weather Service.
Good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the second to last day of September, the 29th. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your latest weather information at weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. Find us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. In the late afternoon, you'll get an afternoon map briefing of all the state weather concerns there. It's about 2.5 minutes long. It loads up very quickly on YouTube. You can find that from NWS Anchorage or NWS Fairbanks. And then after this show, on our broadcast partner here at alaskapublic.org, on their YouTube channel or on their actual website, you can get the entire Alaska Weather show there. It's a little bit longer. It's about 30 minutes in entirety. So again, that'll take up your cell phone bill just a little bit more. But if you're looking for something on that, you can certainly zip right through and skim to the part that you need. On Facebook, under NWS Alaska, find more information about what's going on the North Slope today. Many of you have found that information there with the snow occurring there and certainly some of the high surf conditions. We'll get to that here right away. Up across the Chukchi Seacoast and around the Baldwin Peninsula and Selawik Valley, high surf advisories are going to continue there till about 10 o'clock tonight. We expect those to continue through the evening hours with breaking waves up to about 6 to 8 feet and high surf conditions continuing into the evening and then subsiding as we head into the overnight. Now for the western Arctic coast, including Wainwright to about Point Hope, we're looking at high surf conditions that will create breaking waves of 8 to 10 feet, and the advisory will last until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Looking for high surf conditions there to continue overnight. And then for the northern Arctic coast, we expect that to subside in about half an hour or so. The advisory will be allowed to drop off. So this area here around Barrow, look for high surf conditions there with high breaking waves to subside fairly quickly as we go through the rest of the evening. So high surf conditions continue for the Chukchi Seacoast and the northern Arctic coast as we go through this evening and into the early morning hours of tomorrow. And we'd love to see pictures. If you have pictures or video, some of you from Kivalina, Kotzebue, and Shishmaref have been posting pictures on Instagram. If you tag it with AKwx, that's a great way for us to find that, or tag it NWS Alaska, and we can search for it that way as well, or post it to our Facebook page, and that way we can see what you're seeing, and that helps us do our job better for you, and then the whole process repeats itself. So hopefully things are a little bit more easily shared now on Facebook and on Instagram or Twitter. High surf advisories continue for the Arctic coast and Kotzebue Sound, as we just talked about, and the snow and at least a little bit of rain mixing in continues on the North Slope this evening. Look for more of that. Gusty winds are found across southern coast. So many areas were experiencing some at least gap wind issues from the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians all the way through Prince William Sound and around Cordova. Look for those gusty winds there around Whittier tonight and into tomorrow. The split jet stream aloft around 30,000 feet is also affecting the storm path and potential typhoon formation across eastern Asia and perhaps some involvement with the Gulf of Alaska as we head toward the end of the week and early next week. Here's a look at some previous satellite imagery, and you'll notice the low pressure system working its way across the eastern chain and across the Gulf of Alaska. Pretty steady stream of moisture moving northward into western Canada, and a cold front that's slicing across the mainland of Alaska. As that's happening, a lot of wind developing across south central Alaska this evening. You're noticing more snow on the peaks there. A lot of that has been falling across the North Slope as well, and the Brooks Range. As this system sweeps across the North Slope, expect the winds to continue to cut in from the north and west. Now here's the latest surface satellite picture, and of course the frontal positions. Low pressure sitting across the northern Gulf at 1,004 millibars, a 1,002 millibar low just north of Haida Gwaii, and colder air slowly dropping southward. There were a few rain showers across southeast today, some of those ranging from about 2/10 around Juneau and points north to about 4/10 as you get down toward Ketchikan and Metlakatla. Some of the warmest weather, of course, down south today. Across the North Pacific, a 994 millibar low there across the central chain. That's got an occluded front just on the northern edge of that, drawing in an east and northeasterly flow across the southern Bering Sea. A little bit of fog associated with that, but things look to be pretty nice and fair out around the Pribilofs this afternoon. Showers across the mid-Yukon Valley, some of those mixing in with a little bit of snow, but conditions were still fairly mild around Kivalina and Selawik Valley that we were looking at mainly liquid precipitation from the observations that we could see anyhow. Perhaps your experience was a little bit different. A little bit of light rain around Prudhoe Bay. That for sure was mixing in with snow by late afternoon, and cold front sweeping in from the north will change that up a little bit. A better chance for some snow showers and accumulating snow as we head through tonight and into tomorrow. Snow showers out in advance of that and around Arctic Village. Points south into the interior and especially high elevations. We'll be looking at snow showers continuing through this evening. And in south central, most areas are not going to see a big amount of precipitation. Probably some passing showers, a very quick burst, but up above 2,500 feet or so, you'll probably see at least a little more snow on some of the hilltops. Certainly the case this afternoon. Rain and showers expected for southeast tonight, mostly showers for areas around Juneau and points southward. Out across the west, high pressures in charge, slowing the winds down for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and the Alaska Peninsula. And then once you get south of Sand Point, conditions really start to pick up again with those stronger breezes from the east and southeast, ripping right across the Aleutians. Nothing terribly strong, but there are going to be some gales on the Pacific side. A very tight gradient there compared to what you're finding north with high pressure and command around Nunavak Island and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. That's also the boundary line between where the weather is creating a lot of cloud cover across the Yukon Valley and north of the Kuskokwim. We're finding a little bit more of a colder flow by Tuesday across the Arctic coast, periods of light to moderate snow there, and mainly periods of rain mixed with snow across the interior for Glen Allen and points east. Again, we're not expecting any major accumulation with this, but it does look like there's going to be an opportunity for you to at least see some of the snowflakes passing through. High pressures moving ashore. Very close to Newtok and Amonik, 1,029 millibars. And our low pressure system across the North Pacific is dropping just a little bit further south. We still get those easterly winds curving on the northern side, but the main low pressure system is actually moving away from the Aleutians ever so slightly. The ridge extends out into the Gulf of Alaska. Low pressure is moving in a little bit more from the west to the east, closer to the southeastern coastline, and a better chance for rain for many in southeast tomorrow, while most in south central and southwest. And the west coast should be fairly dry. Areas of fog continue out around the Bering. Look for a partly cloudy sky around the Pribilofs tomorrow. Wednesday, high pressures in command, but you're starting to get into more of those easterly winds. Had a little bit of a breezy day today. Expect that again for Wednesday. And occluded fronts moving in from the west. That's going to keep moderate to occasionally light rainfall across the central and west central Aleutians there. Our frontal boundary across the Gulf of Alaska is starting to pull in some warmer air, barely visible on the map here. The low pressure center is still just to our south. You can see the pressure gradient tightening up from Kodiak Island southward towards Sand Point, Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. And high pressure is trying to take over the northern Gulf. So the winds that we've got across most areas around Prince William Sound tonight should be subsiding as we go into the midweek. A look up north shows a cold front approaching the Chukchi Seacoast and the Kotzebue Sound region once again. That means the winds are going to shift to more of a colder northerly direction. Watch for some areas of rain and snow showers there for the higher terrain. That's certainly snow. For the lower terrain, it's probably going to be more of a mix. And the further south you go, we'll start to see a few showers of rain pop up. Across southeast, a little bit of drier weather working its way in toward the north around Gustavus, maybe into Juneau. But the further south you go toward Petersburg, Wrangell, Hyder, Ketchikan, Annette, maybe even Sitka, you're looking at some light rainfall there. That's a look at surface weather. As we check on current conditions this afternoon, most areas in southeast we're dealing with highs in the mid to upper 50s. A few places approach 59 degrees like Ketchikan and Annette, 55 in Sitka and Juneau today, 53 for Yakutat. Prince William Sound saw temps in the lower to mid 50s. A blustery day in Cordova and Valdez and Whittier, Seward, 55 in Homer today, 47 for Kenai and 46 in Anchorage, 52 for Talkeetna. Glen Allen was only 37. Mid-40s for Fairbanks, while surrounding hillsides saw temperatures in the upper 30s, like Fort Greely up toward Healy at 34. Northward still, Arctic Valley was only 28. AKwx Pass a little bit milder at 30. 33 in Barrow with periods of gusty winds and poor visibility. 38 around Wainwright. Lower 40s for the Kotzebue Sound region. Shishmaref was only 37 though, with some high waves there. 45 around St. Lawrence Island and Gamble. Mid-40s for the Norton Sound communities there. Galena was 42, down the road toward Ruby, 46. McGrath was 43. Bethel showed 48 by late afternoon. And once you got into Bristol Bay, temperatures peaked closer to 50 degrees for King Salmon and Dillingham. Kodiak Island was in the lower 50s. 40s and 50s for most of the Alaska Peninsula, including Pilot Point and Port Hayden. 54 in Sand Point. Lower 50s for Cold Bay and Falls Pass. The Pribilofs were trying to get back to 50 degrees. It may not happen anymore this season, but it got close today. 52 in Atka, 48 in Adak, and 52 for Attu around Shemya there. As you look at southeast overnight, expect lows back in the mid-40s. South Central and Prince William Sound will fall into the lower to mid-30s. Valdez could be looking at 28, 36 in Kodiak Island, upper 20s and lower 30s for the interior, including the Middle Tanana Valley. Eagle 25, 19 for Arctic Village, and low 30s for most of the Arctic coast. The exception could be Prudhoe Bay at 27. 33 for Kivalina and Kotzebue, 37 around Shishmaref. As you look at southwest, temperatures will start off cool, but by the late afternoon, look for readings back in the lower 50s there. Bethel, you're looking at 46. Fairbanks 41, Nome 46 degrees, about the same there for Kotzebue Sound. The Arctic coast in the mid-30s, South Central upper 40s to lower 50s with some of the warmest weather around Cordova and probably Seward, 55 in Kodiak. Southeast expect highs in the upper 40s to lower 50s with the warmest weather once again around Ketchikan, Annette, and Metlakatla. Flying weather tomorrow includes a wide chunk of IFR from Barrow to points east through Kaktovik, including Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, the Chukchi Seacoast, and just north of Kotzebue Sound, including Red Dog Mine area and eastward, probably toward Ambler. Also looking at IFR conditions through the afternoon. Just east of Atka to Nikolsky and maybe Dutch Harbor in Alaska. Around the northern edge of that front should be looking at IFR conditions. MVFR will prevail north of the Alaska Range for most of the mainland, and most of southeast is expecting MVFR. The Pribilofs, though, at this point, by tomorrow afternoon, should be VFR flying. Here's your pass conditions. Then AKwx and Adigan Pass are expected to turn over toward IFR conditions throughout the day and worsen. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect MVFR. Rainy Pass should be MVFR. Windy Pass as well as Isabel Pass expected to be marginal throughout most of the day. In Tasta Pass, we should see MVFR conditions probably worsening toward IFR throughout the day. Tanita Pass, we expect to be VFR, as well as Portage Pass may still be a little blustery throughout the day, but visibility should be okay. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to remain MVFR. Your freezing levels show that colder air is winning most of the mainland. Most of the region is between 2, 4, and 6,000 feet for the freezing levels there, and you can see that's taken over most of southeast as well. We still have some warmer air nudging its way into the southern portions of the Alaska Peninsula at this point. Icing potential generally above 4,000 feet for the Arctic coast. Now there will be some isolated spots where that's considerably lower, but most areas probably occasional moderate. And for southeast, northern sections of southeast above 6,000 feet, and the Aleutians generally above 8,000 feet. Tomorrow's jet stream shows low pressure dropping out of the eastern Asian continent. Also low pressure across the Beaufort Seacoast with some faster winds there across the west around 60 knots and an onshore flow aloft between 80 and 90,000 feet. The much stronger flow of the jet stream located well south of the Aleutians is driving winds up to 150 knots. And this split is focusing weather in the Gulf and focusing on the North Slope at this point. 9,000 feet. A broad easterly flow there is at the surface anyway. The driving westerly flow in at 9,000 feet from 20 to 30 knots. High pressure is dragging in the winds here from the north and west across the Seward Peninsula. We have that easterly flow cutting back in across the Aleutians from 15 to 30 knots. And low pressure across the southern Yukon between 15 and 30 knots. They're bringing that onshore flow and about 15 to 35 knots into southeastern Alaska. At 9,000 or 3,000 feet, I should say, light northerly flow picks up a little bit more as it moves toward the middle Yukon Valley, 15 to 25 knots there. Westerlies across the Arctic coast at 30 knots. And winds are driving in from the north around 15 to 35 knots, a little bit stronger here across the north and eastern Gulf. High pressure sitting right over St. Matthew and the Pribilofs. That's more of an easterly flow, and we've seen that with our surface winds as well. Some of those a little bit gusty today. South and easterly winds coming across the Aleutians from 15 to 35 knots out in the west, and our ridge again extends into the Gulf of Alaska. So turbulence potential, there's quite a bit. It's going to be a very gap confined, so in south central, watch those gaps across the western Alaska range below 6,000 feet. Across the Aleutians, watch for a broad area of faster moving winds, especially below 6,000 feet. And across the western Brooks Range below 4,000 feet, you're going to run into some occasional moderate with at least some light to isolated moderate east of Barrow along the Arctic coast. Southeast at this point, most areas should be fine except for just offshore and maybe right there from Sitka southward toward the Dixon entrance. Let's look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back in just a few minutes with an update on the ice edge and some localized freeze-ups there, and of course the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. This evening, we are happy to have as our guest Steve Williams. Steve is a designated pilot examiner, a Gold Star flight instructor, an airframe and power plant mechanic, and a pilot with over 15,000 hours. Although there are any number of things that we could talk to Steve about and learn a lot from him, tonight we're going to be talking to him about angle of attack indicators. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me.
The Federal Aviation Administration has recently made some changes that allow pilots to install angle of attack indicators in their aircraft. And you recently had one installed in one of your aircraft. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
We just put the Bendix King AOA in one of our Super Cubs. We installed it last month, so I've got about a month now playing with it.
And why did you choose a Super Cub to install this angle of attack indicator?
Well, we have several airplanes, and we picked the Super Cub because that is the airplane that many accidents happen, and they happen from people flying too slow because it's necessary to fly slow to get in the places they go. And so there's a lot of stall spin accidents on approach to landing and on departure. And so angle of attack indicator is a huge asset in a Super Cub.
And I suppose just the type of places that people go in a Super Cub, they need to get pretty slow before they land on a really short strip, and an angle of attack indicator can help them either in landing, on takeoff from a short strip, or while they're circling around or maneuvering.
All of the above. Angle of attack indicator helps people get slow enough. It helps you slow down, you know when you're coming in if you're going too fast. And also it'll let you know if you're getting too slow on a visual cues.
So had you flown with any aircraft with angle of attack indicators installed before?
Before the Super Cub, I had flown a Citation for doing medevac flying for several years, and it had an angle of attack indicator. And it would let you, instead of calculating your speeds, it would tell you your angle of attack was correct. So you'd always fly the correct angle of attack on every approach. We still had to calculate our speed, but it would verify that all your calculations were correct.
And was it pretty user-friendly?
The one in the Citation was not as user-friendly as the one that we now have in our Super Cub. One in the Super Cub works really good.
Oh, great. So they're new and improved.
It's definitely a better system. It was an analog system that we had on the Citation, and this is a digital color bar readout with a blue dot when you have your 1.3 VSO. It works, it's really intuitive.
Okay, so how close does it come to give you a warning before you actually enter a stall?
When you're cruise, it has a green bar, and then when you're slowing down on downwind and base, it'll go yellow, and then when you get to your 1.3 VSO, it'll turn blue, and then as you get slower than 1.3 VSO, it'll start turning red, and then When it gives you 2 red bars, it starts talking to you. And then when it gives you a red arrow, it starts, it lets you know that you're slow. It starts talking to you through your audio and through a visual display.
So basically, you just have to interpret colors. You don't have to figure out any calculations or think about numbers.
I like people to have a yellow bar on base, a yellow bar until your wings level, ball centered on final, and then a blue dot, and I carry a blue dot all the way down till landing's assured, and then you can then you can get a red bar, but you don't want the arrow before you touch down.
Okay, that makes sense. As an instructor, does this help you teach students about stalls, or is it just used for landings?
It's great on stalls because an airplane will stall at any airspeed and any pitch attitude, and so it will if it gives you a red line when you're in downwind, because in your turn you're not losing altitude and you build G-forces, it lets you visualize the angle of attack on an indicator, and it will light up the red line in some places people would be amazed. And so it's a good teaching tool of angle of attack instead of just pitch attitude and airspeed.
And it's easier then for pilots to absorb that information.
It's another tool. I don't want people flying an angle of attack as a primary instrument, but it's a teaching tool. It lets them understand why their angle of attack can change when they're turning downwind to base, when their nose didn't raise. So it's a tool that helps people understand flying.
Sounds like a great safety aid.
It's a great safety aid. When I was flying this weekend and the Talkeetnas landed in some short strips, I turned it off because I got tired of it talking to me when I was landing. And then when I was coming in on my next approach, I missed it. I turned it back on quickly.
Well, thank you, Steve. I look forward to hearing more about angle of attack indicators and your experience with them.
Thank you. I enjoy flying them, and sorry about that.
No, we'll look forward to hearing more next time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in to Hangar Flying. We look forward to bringing you some more information about this new technology and how easy it is to use and what a great safety aid it is. Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll see you again on Friday. Now, as you look at today's Sea Ice Edge and the analysis from the Alaska Sea Ice Program, you'll notice some new coastal ice there from Prudhoe Bay all the way toward Kaktovik and almost to the demarcation point there. Northward, the main ice pack is still well offshore, but there certainly is some seeming like some rapid growth on the north end and along the main ice pack there as temperatures continue to drop, and we see that colder air advancing quickly. So if you want to see any more information about this in detail or download the files you need to make maps similar to this using things like Google Earth as we have, you can do that very easily by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. On to the marine weather now for southeast. South flow working up through the inner waterways from 15 to as high as 25 knots across the Clarence Strait with 5-foot seas in the south, 4-foot seas around the Lynn Canal. A north and westerly onshore flow from Yakutat remains around 25 to 30 knots or so. The seas around 12 to 13 feet on Tuesday. By Wednesday, the flow shifts as that front shifts southward through southeast. The winds will be the highest in the north and south Lynn Canal, around 25 knots with a 5-foot sea, and the lightest around the Clarence Strait, around 10 knots for the westerly flow with 2-foot seas there. Otherwise, offshore flow now from Yakutat to Sitka from the north and the east. We're looking at 15 knots out of the northern entrances with a 13-foot sea there. Still looking at an onshore flow into the Dixon entrance, though, at 25 knots with an 8-foot sea on Wednesday. Now for Tuesday, northerlies will cut through the Cook Inlet around 10 knots or so with 2 to 3-foot seas. Westerlies and northwesterlies developing around the Barren Islands at 25 knots with 6 to 7-foot seas there. It's still looking for some higher gusts out of Prince William Sound and the Cordova and Valdez areas, 3 to 6-foot seas. Those should be diminishing throughout the day, though. The northern Gulf, 25 knots, drops to 15 knots as we get into Wednesday. 3 to 4-foot seas. Those higher gusts may still be around early in the day, but they should be diminishing if not gone, by Wednesday morning. Northeasterlies will work through the Cook Inlet area, 10 to 20 knots from the north end all the way down to the Barrens with a 5-foot sea, 6-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and easterlies coming into Kodiak Island at 30 knots with a 6-foot sea. The Alaska Peninsula, northeasterlies a little bit stronger around Bristol Bay tomorrow, 3-foot seas there. Northerlies coming out of the Castle Cape area and Chignik, 5-foot seas in the northern Gulf, a little bit stronger with an easterly flow further to the west there. By Wednesday, an east and northeasterly wind, again following that strong storm that's just in the North Pacific. 30 to 35 knots, 10 to 18-foot seas there. Northeasterlies, 8 to 9-foot seas there in the Bering on Wednesday. For the Aleutians, an east and northeasterly flow for the central and eastern Aleutians, 25 to 35 knots there with the strongest winds and highest seas in the North Pacific between 13 and 15 feet. 8 to 10 feet across the Bering, and an east and northeasterly flow in the west and west central chain. 25 knots with a 9 to 10-foot sea on Tuesday. That turns a little bit more to the east and southeast on Wednesday, and we're still looking at mainly a north and easterly flow for the central and eastern chain between 25 and 35 knots, 8 to 11-foot seas in the Bering, and 14 to as high as 16 feet seas across the Nikolsky and Unalaska on the Pacific side. Across the west coast, we've got a westerly flow in St. Lawrence and an easterly flow coming across the Pribilofs on Tuesday, thanks to high pressure being in charge and a storm to the south and a storm to the north. Northeasterlies coming out of the Kuskokwim Delta region, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea there. More of a variable flow north of Nunivak Island, becomes northeasterly with time on Wednesday. The 4-foot sea developing, and we still have easterlies coming across the Pribilofs with a 9-foot sea on Wednesday. For the Arctic coast, north and westerly winds for all areas there. 15 knots inside of Kotzebue Sound, northwesterlies north of Barrow, and westerlies north of Kaktovik with a 4-foot sea. Southwesterlies developing there for the Beaufort Seacoast on Wednesday. Winds diminishing for the Chukchi Seacoast with a west and southwesterly flow developing for areas north of Barrow at 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. So high surf conditions should be diminishing as we go through the next 24 hours. Cold front sweeping across the north slope tonight and tomorrow means more snow for more places there. You look for snow showers in the interior, rain for southeast, and high pressure still in charge of the west coast through the next couple days. 1,029 millibar high there, and periods of rain may mix with snow across southeast and northern sections of the interior. Wednesday, another front's on the way. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.